So today we're going to continue the 7 series of talks on the Buddha energies of the wisdom families. And today specifically is Vajra. And Vajra is one of my primary energies, so I'm very familiar with it, but it was actually quite difficult to start immediately writing about it because it's the ocean that I swim in. It's the looking at some of the other energies, it's easy to see it in other people and to look from an objective perspective, but it's so much me that I really had to try to step outside of myself and do some reading and some research on it to really get in touch with it. And I also noticed how it impacted my week. And in some of the meetings that I was in, I actually owned up to it. I was in some meetings with some other Buddhists and I owned up to it. And I said, hey, just so you know, I'm giving a talk on Vajra this week. So if you have to cut me off or interrupt at some points or tell me to shut up or if I'm getting too detailed, please just understand that's where I'm coming from, or too tight on certain things. That's just where I'm coming from. So anyway, let me jump into it. Do you enjoy organizing, or do you feel a bit on edge when things aren't organized? Do you like to look up the etymology of words? Do you regularly use to-do lists? Does it annoy you when other people use words or phrases incorrectly? Is your bookshelf organized alphabetically or in some other way? Or do you wish it was? Are you someone who gets straight to the point with no sugarcoating, no talking in circles to get your point across, just direct? Or on the flip side, are you way too detailed in your explanations and you just go on and on and on with way too many details, way too many expletives? And do you get feedback from others about that? And do you find that maybe other people get bored or lost while you're talking? Do you enjoy coloring, or as a kid or even as an adult, do you or did you enjoy coloring within the lines? And did it annoy you when other people would color outside of the lines, especially if you were doing a joint activity together? Do you geek out on neuroscience of the brain? Does it annoy you when cooking at other people's houses and their knives are not sharp, or the knives are just kind of in a drawer with a bunch of other utensils? Do you always or almost always remember to push your cart to the side of the aisle in the grocery store so that it won't get in other people's way? When at the grocery store and you take something off the shelf, do you sometimes or always pull the next item to the front? Do you have a PhD? Are you an architect, a teacher, a scientist, an executive assistant, a carpenter, or a chef? Do you like the art of Salvador Dali? Are you German, British, or somewhere in your recent ethnic history? Are you German, British, Japanese, Korean, Scandinavian, Swiss, or from New York City or the Silicon Valley? Do you work for Google, Microsoft, IBM, or in the IT field? Do you have a variety of passwords and a system for keeping track of them? Or are you just the person who has one for everything? So that would not be Vajra. Do you have a retirement fund? Do you think ahead? Do you go to the dentist every 6 months, to the doctor annually, and do you toss out your toothbrush every 3 months as prescribed? Have you ever been called heady or an intellectual? Do you ever have the thought, if only everyone else could see the world the way I do, everything would be so much better? So if any of those, or maybe if a lot of those things are true for you or similar things like that, then you might be a Vajra, a primary one of your primary energies might be Vajra, or it might be, or if some of those things were, a good number of them were true, or things like that, then Vajra might be one of your secondary. It might be your secondary energy. If all of that feels extremely foreign, and you get annoyed or frustrated by the people in your lives who are like that, then you're probably a Ratna or a Padma. And Vajra might be something that you use when you need to, but it's not something that you enjoy too much. So we're talking about Vajra energy. So through these talks, it's helpful to kind of check in with yourself, but also notice other people in your life that hold these energies, because part of the utility of these Buddha family talks and these energies in this system, which comes from us from the Vajrayana tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, is to be able to notice our own limitations and constrictions, the way we constrict and cause suffering for ourselves and others, and then also to develop acceptance and appreciation for other people and their differences and how they are. It's also an opportunity to notice if we're not a Vajra, or we're not whatever the energy is that I'm talking about, it's also helpful to see where we might be missing. So, if our house is highly unorganized and we keep causing suffering for ourselves because we can't find things, the keys are lost again. I ran out of gas on the side of the road again, then, whatever energy like Vajra, for example, might be really helpful to cultivate more in one's life. So I want to read, probably many people are familiar with this book, Zen Training by Katsuki Sakita. It's a wonderful book. It's very thorough, but if you read this book, you will definitely enter the energy of Vajra. It's very, very Vajra. So I want to read a couple excerpts from it just to give you a feeling here. So this is on koans. This is a chapter on koans. When the student has caught hold of mu in absolute samadhi, he is told to recapture it in the light of reason. What has been intuitively known gives rise to subjective conviction, but it should be illuminated by reason so that an objectively confirmed understanding is achieved. An objectively confirmed understanding of Zen must be embodied in certain concepts and ideas. There are two ways of manipulating concepts. It can be done as purely mental exercise in which we pile concept upon concept, or two, it can be done by connecting every concept to our own actual experience. So notice where that lands when you hear that. Does your heart feel open right now? Do you feel spacious? Is your mind grappling to try to figure out what the heck he was just talking about? That's what my mind does. Like, what? But just notice how that lands. So for me, when I read that, I feel a lot going on here in my head. And it feels very angular to me, very concise, sharp. And I actually need to reread certain parts of it to see what it's actually saying. And so I really have to turn on the intellectual aspect of my mind to understand that. And not all Zen writing is like that. Some Zen writing, when you read it, it just expands the brain a little. There's space. Not much Zen writing, but some Zen writing will actually touch the heart. And the heart will open and we'll feel connected to other people and other beings and with ourselves. In some Zen writing, we might feel very abundant and like there's so much life. And these are all the different energies. But this one is, I think, very specifically Vajra. Now, here's what's interesting. about that reading, and I could read more, but the whole book is like that. The whole book reads like that. So Sakita actually had a lot of help translating his writings. And initially it was getting help by Robert Aiken Roshi, but then actually most of it was translated and edited by A.V. Grimstone, who was a scientist and a member of the London Zen Society. And Grimstone also wrote books on cell biology and electron microscopes. So was it Sakita who was so Vajra, or was it the translator who was so Vajra? And so the UK is traditionally known as a Vajra culture. It has other energies, of course, as well. But so anyway, and then Japan is also known as a Vajra culture. So when you look at the gardens, everything is precise. It's almost like a golf course. Their gardens are much like golf course, very like we see here as golf courses. Everything is precise, trimmed. There's a perfection of flow with it all. So interesting, we add a Japanese writer with a British translator, and we get an extremely Vajra, a translator who was also a scientist, and we get an extremely Vajra writing. So that gives us a little feel of what Vajra is. And actually this gives us a taste of both the power and strength of Vajra energy, as well as the limitation of it. The limitation of Vajra energy can be rigid, sharp, and it can be disembodied at times. So it can actually, Vajra energy is typically known to be more in the head, like clarity of mind, and sort of chest, but not heart, but sort of the protective aspect of this chest. So just a reminder, and then I'll go into Vajra energy in more detail. The yellow is Ratna, abundance. Green is karma, energy, action. Red is Padma, relationship, love, caring, compassion. White is Buddha, spaciousness. And the blue is Vajra. So I want to give you another taste of Vajra energy. And you can close your eyes for this if you want, or keep your eyes open. It's a bit of a visualization. So most of us have lived or live in a place that gets pretty cold in the winter. And to feel this brilliance of Vajra, let's recall a cold, still winter day out in the west somewhere where humidity is minimal. It's mid-morning, the sun is out. There's not a single feeling of a breeze or wind, and there's not a single cloud in the sky. The air is silent and crisp. Faceted snow crystals coat the surface of the snow and shimmer with the sun's reflection. Far into the distance, we see a crane taking flight. The crunch of snow echoes across the plain or through the valley as we take a step forward. The mind is empty, without agenda, but it perceives everything. It notices everything. A soothing joy eases its way through the body as the mind is aware of its own freedom and lack of hindrance. With the sun illuminating our faces, we take a deep breath, and in that moment, there's nothing we do not know and no question that we cannot answer. There's no pride about this ability, just clarity. So notice how that feels in your body and where you feel that. So in the chakra system, the sixth chakra is right here in the forehead, the seventh in the crown. So if we combine those two and get in touch with those, you can get a sense of that Vajra clarity. So this is the brilliance of Vajra. It's fearless and steady. It knows beyond conventional knowing. It's really in touch with that prajna, wisdom. It sees the patterns of karmic cause and effect laid out in front of it without any aspect hidden. So you really see cause and effect happening right in front of you. You can see the future happening in front of you right now in the present, because you can see how things are unfolding. You can see how things have unfolded from the past and made this moment this moment. It's very clear. Vajra wisdom utilizes the executive functions of the brain, which are largely here in the frontal lobes, and organizes, plans, envisions, and discards unnecessary information. The Vajra mind appreciates routine and being able to anticipate what is coming next. It notices what needs to be done and where the barriers to progress lie. The Vajra mind functions linearly. There's no wasting time with tangential storylines or unnecessary emotionality. It is efficient, focused, and undistractable. Now, as we know, each of these Buddha energies has also a neurotic side or twisted side, confused, the part that filters through childhood trauma, childhood challenging experiences. And these are the places that cause us suffering. So this is the karma of our suffering. And so each of us with our own sort of energetic soup, with some of us being more Vajra Buddha karma, or some people being more Ratna Padma karma. Your own energetic soup of karma has both its wisdom aspects and its neurotic aspects. And those neurotic aspects, if we pay attention to them, then we can reduce our suffering. And also the suffering that spreads out and causes other people. So when Vajra energy is used as protection, it has the ability to cause great harm. Its cool clarity flips to cold, heartless criticism and judgment. Because we see everything from Vajra, it's so clear, but we lack Buddha spaciousness or Padma compassion. We get very annoyed and judgmental and critical of those in our lives who aren't doing it right. Or when we're on the road, ugh, how come everybody's not using the yield lane like you're supposed to? Does everybody know that you're actually supposed to ride both lanes all the way to the yielding point and then you yield? That's what you're supposed to do. But a lot of people don't do it.
Also zipper.
What does that mean?
When you're getting on and there's cars coming, you zipper one each in each person.
Right. So when you yield, you do every other one. That's the way it's supposed to work. But a lot of people get into the left lane, and then there's this huge lane open, and then somebody pulls over because they're angry at you for trying to get in front of them. And it's like, actually, so us Vajras, we know this stuff and we get annoyed by it. And then we might get road rageful, so then we're causing suffering for ourselves and others. So the expansive awareness that notices freely and delights in the contrast of distinctions constricts into a tight hallway of angular, metallic, lonely perception. It can become very lonely. Often people do not like modern hospitals for this reason, because you go in, there's no windows, there's not much art. It's very angular and white and metallic, and people are wearing lab coats. So it's a very Vajra type of environment, a Vajra Buddha kind of environment. It's kind of heartless. It doesn't have much life to it. Some people are making changes to that. So in the state of confused Vajra energy, there is only one right way. And this one right way is very clear to the person perceiving it. It can be no other way. It is the best way, and it is apparent. Everyone else is wrong, and they're not just wrong, but they're stupid. So there can be a tone that comes across of judgmentalness that underlying has this view, this unconscious view that everybody else is just stupid. And so sarcasm, if you write out the sarcasm, there's usually a line in there, because you're stupid. Or if you weren't stupid, you would, right? It's so obvious. Constricted Vajra energy ruminates and analyzes and gets stuck in its own quagmire of interpretations and informational gestations. Their confusion becomes mistaken for clarity. Yet they force that confusion onto others and expect them to believe it and get on board with it, and get very upset when anyone disagrees with it. Confused Vajra comes to rely on its systems and feels afraid and anxious when those systems are disrupted. Rules, laws, social norms. When everyone follows them, everything's fine. But in the twisted Vajra, when somebody breaks that pattern, control is lost and chaos is the Antichrist. In the Buddhist practice and teachings, we can see the confusion of Vajra readily available in how we can misinterpret the teachings of the precepts. So here we have them, kind of like the commandments. Here's these rules. And a lot of people, when they come to Buddhism, they're like, whoa, I left Christianity because I didn't want to deal with that stuff. Or I left whatever religion because I don't want to deal with that stuff. I'm here for the space. But here's these precepts telling us how we're supposed to live. Do not kill, do not steal, do not lie, do not misuse sexuality, do not misuse intoxicants, do not talk about others' errors and faults, do not talk about the teachers, and so on. And so without flexibility, without agility, without spaciousness, without connecting to our humanity that's down here, our bellies and our hearts and our pelvic areas, we can forget our humanity and get stuck in these rigid rule-following types of Vajra confusion. We can also see this when we get stuck in the driving for Kensho, the driving for awakening, for realization. And in some writings, you'll see that so incredibly forced. Like, if you're not doing this, you're not doing Zen. There's some Vajra confusion right there. Also, people can get stuck in koans. Koans are a wonderful Vajra practice that actually take a Vajra mind and expand it into Buddha, and expand it into Ratna, and expand it into Padma. These koans are actually meant to lift us out of constriction into space and into other energies. But when we don't get it, when our mind gets super tight around a koan, and we don't get it, we get frustrated and we lose our enthusiasm. So I want to give you a koan. I'll go for about 5 more minutes here. I want to give you a koan, case 38, the Book of Equanimity. So my name is Mui, which means no rank, and that's where this is the koan that it comes from. Attention, Rinzai addressed the assembly saying, "There is a true person of no rank. He is always leaving and entering the gates of your face. You beginners who have not witnessed him, look, look." Thereupon a monk asked, "What about this true man of no rank?" You have to imagine there might be some arrogance there, or there was clarity. It might be, "What about this true man of no rank?" Could be either one. Rinzai got down from the seat and grabbed him by the shoulders. The monk hesitated, and Rinzai pushed him away, saying, "This true man of no rank, what a shit stick he is." So in that moment, can you put yourself in there? And this is what we do with koans. You put yourself in the situation. So imagine being that monk. Here's the teacher saying something, and there's a part of you, either arrogance or your own clarity, that shows up and says, "What about me? I have some realization. I have some clarity. I feel clear right now." And then he pounces. And he jumps off his seat and comes down and grabs you by the, and looks at you with like Vajra eyes that can see right through you, can see through all your ego, all your BS, all your facades, and just see right into your soul. I think most of us would be like, whoa. Or if you grew up doing karate, you might have this automatic like karate chop. Now, some people, I'm usually a person when I'm challenged like that in the moment, my brain goes, I go into some kind of shock mode. Some people are actually really good at coming right back with some kind of clear response. So in that moment, if you can, there might be fear that arises. In that moment, if we can speak from that fear, like, oh, I'm scared of you right now. What a beautiful response that might be, right? Or if someone's really, really clear, which is probably not me, they might not feel any fear at all. This person is no threat to me whatsoever. And if they were really, truly clear, they might grab him back. What about you? Or something like that. Who knows? Anyway, Renzai is known for his Vajra clarity. Is known for his, maybe a Vajra karma, like action and that clarity, right? But we see that a lot in the koans. There's some kind of monk or another person saying something, and then there's this quick answer. Now, we don't know how quick that answer was in reality. Maybe in reality, the Zen master was like, for a long time, like, hey, give me a second here, huh? And then they came back with the answer. We don't know really. But the way they read is there's this like quick, sharp Vajra response that cuts through all of delusion and then wakes up the monk or the other person that's there. So our spiritual teachers and mentors of any kind must have some version of Vajra. They're going to have some large access to Vajra energy. Now, lots of people can finish their training and they might not become teachers. They might be the gardener. They might be if you think back to the monastery and there was thousands of people living in these monasteries, they might not hold a role of a teacher because that's just not what their energy is. But they teach, right? They teach through their actions and their words and the way they are. But typically teachers, school teachers, academics, anybody who can put information out in a way that is digestible to others is going to be using that Vajra energy in that moment. Our Vajra is coming back to Vajra people in general, our Vajras are not always the warmest. But without them, we would have bridges that would fall apart when we drove across them. We would have houses that the ceiling would just suddenly fall down because there wasn't clarity in how to put that nail or which type of screw to put in. Crops would be planted in the wrong seasons. And we would get to the movie theater and the movie would have already started 20 minutes before because the person just didn't have a sense of accuracy around time. So the Vajras in our world, in our lives, are really important. They're really important people to have around. In your families, they might have shown up in the confused aspect as a critical mother or father, or a critical sibling. They might show up in your workplace as someone who's critical in that way. They might also show up as a healthy disciplinarian or someone who's holding boundaries well. Boundaries are require Vajra energy to set in place. In relationships, we often get a masculine energy and a feminine energy, even in same-sex relationships. And people in those relationships, whether they're same-sex or heterosexual relationships, people can swap the energies depending on the day and the activity and the task at hand. So masculine energy often shows up as a Vajra, as the one who pays the bills, who makes sure that the lights are turned off at night, that the plans are made for the weekend, that the right supplies are all gathered for the camping trip, right? And they often pair with a Padma or a Ratna who is, oh, let's go there. They decide where we're going to go. Like, that's so beautiful. And then the Vajra makes all the logistics happen to get it to happen, to go. Yeah. So in these relationships, we can see these types of pairings. All right, just a few more minutes here. Mothers, now some of you might relate and might have had a mother with a Vajra type of energy. Again, Vajra is not naturally warm. It's clear. So mothers who are primarily Vajra energy don't always make the best mothers. Now, if they have some Padma in there and they can access that Padma, then of course they can engage in mutuality with the child and provide some warmth. Here's a stereotype that's a Vajra type mother, is the classic nun in the Catholic school. I didn't go to Catholic school, so I don't know actually how they are, but in all the movies, there's always the Catholic nun who's like the disciplinarian and has the sharp eyebrows and, is not very warm and friendly. So that's an example of sort of the twisted Vajra in the motherly role. So working with the energy, if you are primarily Vajra, working with the twisted aspect of it, is learning to see people's weaknesses as also their strengths, because our strengths and our weaknesses are often tied with our strengths. Our greatest weakness is also our greatest strength. So being able to flip that and see that, and actually learning to give people positive feedback and practicing that can be very helpful. Practices like metta prayer, Tonglen, and the goddess practices can really help a Vajra get out of mind and into body, into heart. And also doing like Auschwitz retreats with the Zen Peacemakers International, and doing these social justice oriented retreats and getting out of one's own sort of angular world into a larger world. And really learning to notice what that constriction feels like, because whatever energy is your primary energy, that's the ocean you swim in all the time. So it feels normal. But in meditation, we get the opportunity to access space, and we get the opportunity to access our emotional states and our feelings. And when we can start to reside in those places more, and then we tighten, then we can see the difference between that spaciousness and the tightness and the constriction. And so part of our practice over time is our mind just becomes more attuned, and it's our Vajra mind becomes more attuned to seeing the shifts in our internal states through a day or over an hour. Voice dialogue can be really helpful to help anybody in a certain energy get out of that energy and access the other energies, the other archetypes, the other vulnerable and protective parts of ourselves. And people with Vajra constriction can learn to say maybe a little more. Maybe, say your belief, but then at the end say maybe. That gives some space for other people to have a view too. Because often Vajras will finish their belief and it sounds like, oh, there's no space for my beliefs to exist here. You can also ask, what do you think? Or that's just my perspective. What's yours at the end of when you say something? And then for those who are not primarily Vajra, who need more access to that, making puzzles, doing crosswords, making goals for yourself and actually following through with them and giving yourself a reward when you follow through. Following the protocols in the Zendo or at your workplace and leaning into the resistance you feel around what feels tight to you as rules and protocols. And in Zazen, actually, instead of kind of having your eyes spacious, focusing on a specific point on the carpet or on the floor and really zoning in on that. And when you notice your mind wanders, you catch it and bring it back. That can really almost instantly, like in yoga, for example, when you do a balance pose, you know, like warrior 3 or tree pose or dancer, often we're encouraged by our yoga teachers to focus on a spot. When I do that, I almost immediately, like my mind just gets really sharp really quick. So that is an introduction to Vajra energy. And I just want to remind us that this isn't about going around diagnosing our family and our partners and our friends, though that can be fun to do, especially if we're a Vajra. But it does give us an opportunity to allow some more space for people to be them and accept them for who they are. And I will say that for me, these teachings, because often we don't understand people who are different from us. Often we like people who are like us, and we get them. We get people who are like us. But when people are different, we think that something is wrong with them. Sometimes we think that something like they should be more like this, or if only they would change like this. And we do a lot of time, we spend a lot of time in our relationships trying to change other people and trying to change them to be more like us. Even and if that doesn't sound accurate, then I'm going to say you're probably just not aware that you're doing it. I would say that as a therapist, so much time of my work and working with people is helping them learn to accept the people in their lives and stop trying to change them. What I have noticed is that change is possible. We can change as human beings, but it's kind of like those ships that take a really long time to turn in the ocean. It's pretty slow. And definitely the older we get, it seems like the slower those turns are. So a lot of our work is really accepting other people as they are and then doing the work here. And then offering feedback, offering suggestions when people are open and willing to it, to hear them, you know, but then letting them do the work from there. So yeah, I would say that it's really helped me accept people who don't have Vajra minds, you know, because I am a Vajra mind, and it's frustrating for me when people aren't really sharp in the way that they function in the world. And so it's given me a lot of space around people who kind of wander their way through decision making, you know. And then it's also, this is an opportunity for us to get in touch with our own limitations, obviously, and see our karma. I mean, this is our practices. You know, the reason why we sit, the reason why we I would say all of us come to Zen practice because we're suffering in some way. Something doesn't feel right. We're not happy enough. There's some kind of trauma that's lingering in our bodies that's uncomfortable. Something's not right. If everything was right, we wouldn't need it. We wouldn't need to come to Zen. You know, so we come to Zen and Buddhism to seek some kind of end or lessen our suffering. So these are just opportunities. These energies are opportunities to see where our suffering is, to get a glimpse of where it is, and then to attend to it. So thank you all for listening. Hope you have a wonderful week.